Let me start this video by taking a quick moment to thank everyone who watched the Gyo video and commented on it. I cannot say enough how much it meant for me for people to watch and like that video. I always say that I make these videos for myself, but I really do want to hear people's thoughts on things, both positive and negative, and the response to that one has been amazing and really interesting to watch, as have actually the more recent comments on the Uzumaki video. Now that that's out of the way, I have decided to keep on checking out the adapted works of Junji Ito. There's not a ton of them, but with the exception of Tomi, they're all pretty much adaptations of his shorter stories, which, while I haven't read a ton of them, I really prefer over his longer stories. This one movie in particular offered me a unique opportunity because Kakashi is based on the short story Scarecrows, which I've never read before. It was the first time that I could watch an adaptation without any kind of tainting and then go watch the inspiration for it. For that reason, I'm going to go over them as I experience them to hopefully get across my experiences with them for the first time. The movie begins with a pretty long scrolling text explaining the idea behind scarecrows as effigies put together in order to scare birds and other creatures away from fields, but also adds on the idea that human-like scarecrows can invite spirits and gods within them to protect the lands that they're planted on, but ends with a warning that sometimes the gods they invite are cruel. We then have a moment of someone we don't know watching a fire burn in horror and questioning why they're here, how they got to this situation. And then, as if to answer that question, we jump back in time to that character visiting her brother's apartment as he seems to have stopped responding to any attempt to contact him from anyone, where she finds a letter from an old girlfriend named Izumi inviting him to her hometown. The sister assumes that this is where he went and immediately follows after him. As she approaches the town, she finds an unsettling tunnel that seems to separate it from the rest of the world. She steals her resolve and attempts to drive through the tunnel, but her car breaks down part of the way through, forcing her to enter on foot. Upon exiting the tunnel, she finds a man seemingly collecting a number of scarecrows in his truck and almost completely ignoring her questions, but he does let her know that he's collecting these scarecrows for a festival that will be happening in town soon, and that to find Izumi's place she just needs to follow the road, which she does, and she continues on her way until she comes across an old lady settling her baby in a pram. As she tries to engage the old woman in conversation, she notices that her baby is actually like a small scarecrow baby and flees. This is actually one of the times that the movie got me, not because I was scared by the scarecrow baby. Me and the missus were actually joking as they set that up that the baby was going to be a gun like the beginning of BioShock. But it got me because as she approaches the woman leaning over the pram, the woman is entirely silent and somewhat still, but she kind of sways with the wind like she herself was a scarecrow. So I thought they were going to hit me with a double scarecrow, like boom, here's the baby scarecrow, and then she was going to look up at the woman and the woman was also going to be a scarecrow. But no, just a normal woman. But it was actually pretty neat. As she continues on her way, she does see another person teaching a small girl about flowers. She recognizes the woman teaching the small girl as a missing person from a flyer that she saw on her way into town. But the man with the truck from outside of the tunnel arrives and picks up the little girl, telling her that she's not supposed to talk to outsiders, before driving off, and while she's distracted, the other lady disappears. Kaoru, which is the name of the girl that I haven't said up to this point for some reason, does eventually make her way to Izumi's house and meets her mother, who's genuinely kind of off-putting to see. Like the other people in town, she doesn't answer any of Kaoru's questions. She's curt. She doesn't seem to want her to be there. But Izumi's father is much more welcoming, explaining that Izumi has fallen ill and is at the clinics, but they haven't seen her brother in town at all. He does offer to let Kaoru stay at his home because her car doesn't work and she left in the tunnel, and she accepts. That night, while she's sleeping, an argument between Izumi's parents wakes her up, and Kaoru decides to investigate their home, going to where she met the mother and in that room finding a scarecrow with human hair and wearing a dress. Izumi seems to appear on the stairs and tell Kaoru that she thinks that Kaoru has come to take her brother away and stop them from being together. She says that Kaoru has always been between them, but that won't matter once Izumi is herself again. Kaoru awakens back in bed, implying that the entire thing may have been a dream, and the next day she heads into town and meets with the police to tell them about her brother and to get her car fixed. Izumi's father warns her that when she gets her car fixed, she needs to leave the village immediately. Otherwise, she won't be able to. Or rather, as he clarifies, she won't want to. The movie up to this point has real Wicker Man vibes. Like, the entire town treats her like a virus that has entered their community, and most of them drop what they're doing and just stare at her disapprovingly. I was really starting to think that they were going to somehow turn her into a scarecrow, like as part of a weird ritual. This thought was interrupted when Kaoru goes into the clinic and finds the missing woman, who we find out is named Sally, before an officer interrupts them and asks Kaoru about her car. And then when Kaoru explains why she's here and what she's looking for, the policeman informs her that her brother's never been in that town, ever. Unfortunately, her car is not going to be able to get fixed that day, so she's forced to stay at Izumi's parents' house again. That night, when she goes to investigate the Izumi scarecrow again, she actually does find her brother, who is working on it, is adding detail and more cloth, and she's trying to call out to him and force her way into the room, but the door is blocked or jammed and he's just completely ignoring her. When she does break in though, she is attacked by the Izumi scarecrow that was in the room. She goes back to meet Sally at the clinic and asks her why she's here and what's going on, before finding out that her father, or who she said was her father, is actually just a scarecrow hunched over a desk holding a pen. And before Sally can tell her what happened or what's going on, a living scarecrow attacks Kaoru. And this is kind of one of the things that I love about Japanese horror. They haven't really embraced the whole CG thing. They're still really big fans of keeping people in suits and letting them work like that. And it should take something away from the whole ordeal, but I like it. Even looking at this guy, who I know is just a guy in a scarecrow suit, I think it's good. I like it. This is also the scene that really kind of starts the third act, the final thing, because the whole town has turned on her and they are going to be violent. She's trapped in her car. It won't start because the mechanic who's supposed to fix it is obviously one of the people against her, and they're all encircling her car, closing in on her as she's trying to turn the engine. It doesn't work, and eventually she's forced to flee on foot. It's supposed to be a tension building kind of thing, but the whole time I found myself just why would your car work? It didn't work on the way in, and the person who was supposed to fix it is standing there threatening you. There's no reason for you to believe that your car would work, but that's a personal nitpick. So, with the festival about to begin, she returns to Izumi's home to search for her brother and ends up finding Izumi's old room, where she finds a journal that reveals that Izumi was deeply obsessed with Kaoru's brother and blamed Kaoru for keeping them apart. She believed that Kaoru was jealous of her and didn't want her to be with her brother, but tells her that none of that's gonna matter once she becomes herself again. And then she appears in the doorway to kind of emphasize this threat. And then she does the point from that bomb-ass scene from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You know the one? Yeah, that one. I was sick. It's here that it becomes revealed by her father that the entire festival is centered around the idea that by creating scarecrows that resemble their loved ones, they can call back the spirits of family members and other loved people who have passed, who will then inhabit the scarecrow, returning them to life. But Izumi's father believes that in their attempt to resurrect her, she has brought a great evil onto the village and is worried that it's going to taint the whole process. He takes Kaoru to see her brother, who is enthralled with the idea of being with Izumi again. And I don't mean like he's just really up on the idea. He's literally magically enthralled. He's obsessed with it. And he even tells Kaoru that the idea of being with her instead of Izumi makes him physically ill, that he doesn't want to be with her. Like at all. I don't mean like romantically. Japan's a weird place, but we haven't gotten there yet. She does manage to break the hold on him, and Izumi's father tells them that they need to leave town right now before the festival begins. And he offers to take them out, but when the truck driving guy comes in from earlier with his unconscious daughter saying that he hit her and now she wouldn't wake up, the father gives them the keys and tells them to leave without him. They get in the car, but Kaoru can't bring herself to abandon Sally, so she goes to get her from the clinic. Sally initially refuses to go with her, but the part of her father that inhabits the scarecrow she made gives her a final message to just leave him and this place, and knowing that he wants her to move on allows her to finally make peace with his passing and her life going forward. As the festival enters its final phase, it's revealed that the truck driving man has beaten his daughter to death. Kaoru and Co begin to make their escape but are attacked by the officer in town, leading to one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, where his arm gets ripped off, implying that he is a scarecrow who previously died and came back. But then he stands up with just the grossest looking animation. Like, it's all physically possible and it looks right. It's so weird to watch. The truck driver's daughter returns to life and seems to murder her father off screen for what he did to her. And as he approaches Izumi's father, she reveals her scarecrow form. So I guess she had also died and was brought back through the festival. And Izumi's dad is murdered as he screams out Izumi's name, seemingly cursing the evil that his daughter has brought to the village. Izumi returns to life as Kaoru and the others determine that if they're going to leave this place, they're going to have to fight their way through it. Izumi's first action back to life is to kill her mother before confronting Kaoru and the others, using her power to call out to Tsuyoshi, that's Kaoru's brother, who seems enthralled once again, until he turns to Kaoru to let her know that he's okay. He knows it's not her. He approaches and embraces Izumi one last time before setting them both on fire with a flare that he had hidden in his pocket, which brings us back to the opening scene of Kaoru watching them burn in terror. Kaoru and Sally attempt to escape and finally make their way back to the tunnel as the rest of the scarecrows in the festival land begin to revive. As they run through, about to be free of this entire ordeal, Kaoru stops because she can hear her brother calling out to her. She looks back the way they came and sees him standing in the doorway. Sally tells her that it's not him, it's not your brother, we need to go. And Kaoru just nods because she knows, but she doesn't know what else there is without him. She doesn't have anyone else. Her parents are gone. She doesn't seem to have a lot of friends or any relationship. She doesn't have anywhere to go and nobody else to live for. This hits me as a little weird to say to someone who just had to leave their father behind earlier, but also kind of reminds me of what Tsuyoshi said when he was obsessed with Izumi, which makes me unclear as to whether or not she's enthralled the way Tsuyoshi was, or if she just really has nothing else but her brother. And unfortunately, we never know which is which, because as Kaoru runs back through the tunnel towards him, the screen fades to black and the credits roll. It's hard to explain how I feel about this movie. After the first viewing, I felt like it had a lot of things going for it, but seemed to fall short of being something really good. But after the second viewing, where I was taking notes, I found myself much more engrossed with most of it until the last 30 minutes or so. And during the third viewing, when I was writing this script, I was still so caught up in the atmosphere and the tension of it all. And I had a little more interest in the overall plot with the townspeople and all of that. I think, and this is going to sound weird because of all the other complaints about my other Junji videos, that it didn't go far enough with the premise that it gave you. There's a lot of interesting ideas, like there's a scarecrow that gets broken into pieces and continues to struggle to attack Kaoru, or the officer who loses his limb and then stands up in a gross way. But there's all this buildup and all these warnings of the evil that Izumi could bring that never really culminates in anything. She dies almost immediately after being revived, and it's never really made clear if the other scarecrows are going to keep her murderous rage without her around, or if they'll be fine, because they seem to have been fine until Izumi showed up. And I don't know what we're supposed to take from this. So while the movie falls short of being particularly good, it's not bad by any means. It does an amazing job creating a very tense atmosphere and a threatening ambiance around Kaoru. The way people stop and look at her, how quiet the whole movie is. The whole thing, it creates a very uncomfortable feeling there. And I didn't really mention them because it's hard to describe in this kind of thing, but there's this running interstitial in between scenes of the townspeople just walking around carrying Scarecrow from place to place, or setting up these little stands and all of that for the festival, to bring back their family. And it creates and maintains this really overwhelming dread to the movie that while Kaoru is going around trying to find her brother and dealing with her own things, there's a much darker story going on in the back that she can't stop, and for the most part isn't really aware of. But every step towards their completion seals Kaoru's fate just a little bit more. So while I definitely recommend it if you're a fan of good atmosphere and tension building, if you're looking for something as deep or metaphorical as his other work, or any kind of monster type movie, this isn't really what you're looking for. Now, immediately following watching this movie the first time, the missus informed me that the movie had a drastically different story from the original short manga. So I, of course, had to go read it. I was genuinely optimistic going into this, as I am a huge fan of his short stories. So I went in with pretty high expectations. I know a lot of you are looking at the time right now. I can promise you this is going to be a lot shorter. Scarecrow opens with a man broken by the loss of his daughter, Yuki, openly weeping as they go to her grave, and the others have to tell him that he needs to bury her remains so that she can move on to heaven. Every day afterward, he returns to give flowers to her grave, until one day a young man arrives to pay his respects to Yuki as well, and this enrages her father, who blames him for her death. The young man in turn says that if the father hadn't been so opposed to their marriage, that Yuki would still be alive, and this causes the dad to storm off. As the young man tries to pay his respects to Yuki, the dad returns with a scarecrow that he plants on her grave, saying that it's to scare away useless people like him. Over the next few days, though, the scarecrow begins to adopt her features, like her hair, her face. It develops hands at one point and becomes actually recognizable as his daughter. This leads to a whole bunch of other people in the town planting scarecrows on their own families' graves, which then adopt their appearances. There is a sub-story about a man who doesn't want his wife to plant one on her son's grave, to which she says that he doesn't understand that she needs this because he's not the boy's real father, and that causes the guy to back off and let her plant the scarecrow. The young man, who's named Toshio, I don't know why I never say anyone's name, finds himself meeting Yuki in a grassy field, promising that he will marry her and be with her forever, no matter what her dad says. To which she responds, "Would you still be with me if I looked like that?" gesturing towards the scarecrow that she had become. Toshio awakens in the graveyard at the foot of her grave with the scarecrow looking down at him. He wonders how he got there. Did her soul call to him? Did one of the scarecrows bring him here? As he ponders these thoughts, the scarecrows around him start whispering. Nothing threatening, nothing even discernible, just a constant barrage of whispering. This drives Toshio to just flee the graveyard in fear, like any person should, and he doesn't stop running until he is clear of all the graves. And then he looks up and sees her once again. He's back at the foot of her grave. As he screams in terror, the scarecrow crashes down on him. Yuki's father returns the next day to find Toshio dead underneath her scarecrow with no visible trauma or damage. As this is happening, the other couple is visiting her son and find that his scarecrow has a face filled with fear and pain, except for his eyes burning with hatred and anger and staring completely at the stepfather no matter where he goes. In anger, the stepfather tries to pull the boy's scarecrow out of its grave and slips, falling down a step, which allows the scarecrow to impale him, killing him instantly. The look of the boy on the scarecrow returns to neutral, a kind of peaceful calm, which leads the mother to remark that she had been right all along. The stepfather had killed her son. The story ends with a panel of Yuki's father walking away, leaving the scarecrow on Toshio's body, finally allowing them to be together in death the way he had resisted their entire lives. And this right here is why I love Junji Ito's short stories so much. Without the need or opportunity to one-up himself constantly, he's told a chilling story that holds the potential for readers to imagine much more terrifying prospects. Now, I'll admit that on the first read, I was left with a few questions and nagging problems, but after rereading it and really taking time to think about what he wanted to get across, I found myself with a pretty deep affection for this story. The artwork and paneling, no matter what I say about anything else, has always been one of his strongest points, and it continues to be amazing in these pages. It's just really good, and it even has a happy ending, which is kind of rare for Junji, in that the two spirits, Toshio and Yuki, were finally able to find some semblance of peace and love in the afterlife, and even the little boy gets revenge on the man who killed him. It's pretty much just aces all around. I'm aware, by the way, that there's an anime adaptation for this in the Junji Ito collection that came out in Crunchyroll, but the Junji Ito collection is just a worse drawn panel for panel adaptation of his stories. So I feel like by reading the manga, I've read the better drawn, better version of that story. So I'm not going to watch that. If this movie and this story are the caliber of entertainment that I have going into the next couple of reviews of Junji Ito's shorter works, then I'm excited, because this is the first time that I like the manga more than the adaptation. But beyond that, what do you think? Have you read the manga? Did you watch the movie? Are you going to do either now? Should I just keep reviewing Junji Ito adaptations until I run out, or should I find other J-horror movies? Normal horror movies? Foreign horror movies? Should I review every single Disney Plus movie in order? I'm really trying to come up with ideas, kind of a plan, so that I can do more than one video every 6 months, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You know, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you remember, whether you like, comment, and subscribe or not, you're still a friend to me. Good night.
We got place to go, things to do, people to see, and we gotta get it done right away.